So welcome everybody to another Behind the Theme. Today we continue with Hammer the Scots and focus on the rise, death and fall of a king. So let's get into it. Last we left out, Robert the Bruce had been forgiven for his excommunication of the killing of John Comyn in a church. Now, as if that was not lucky enough, Robert also finally found himself getting what he always wanted, the kingship of Scotland. That is only declared by the Church of Scotland. Good reason for this being that he had outlived, so to speak, the rest of his rivals, being that John Balliol was alive but not even in Scotland. John Comyn had been killed by him, and so the only practical person left was him. Now, what comes after shows again how influential the church was, in that when this was announced, the Macduffs, which was a clan which had for centuries crowned the kings of Scotland, actually came to give a second ceremony to Robert the Bruce, and this was done by Isabella Macduff. Now, these two ceremonies could hardly have been what the Bruce have imagined for his crowning, as they were pretty bleak affairs, seeing as the situation in practical tone, the royal relic that the Scottish kings was crowned on, the Stone of Destiny or the Stone of Scone, was in England, and Robert was only king in title and not literally in lands. Being crowned King of Scotland, Robert had his entire kingdom to reclaim, and for the most part was hated by the people for his very well-known leanings and turnings to the English when it suited him. And in fact, you must imagine that his dealings with the English was so widespread that even supporting histories of the Bruce had to acknowledge his unpatriotic acts. Now, of course, when news of the rise of this King of Scotland reached Edward Longshanks, he of course was none too happy. So unhappy, in fact, he raised the Dragon Banner, and an army marched into Scotland. Now, the Dragon Banner represented that no prisoners/quarter was to be taken or given. And from this new campaign in Scotland, Robert the Bruce was once again defeated by Edward Longshanks in Perth and goes into hiding. The new King of Scotland's lands being reduced to the island of Rathlin near the Irish coast. Now, although Robert the Bruce got away, Longshanks was not done with the Bruces. He managed to capture and execute 3 of the Bruce brothers and took prisoner Robert the Bruce's wife and daughter, along with Isabella Macduff. Now, in fact, the story of how the wife and daughter of the Bruce was captured was actually quite an interesting one. What happened was, the Bruce's family was sold out by a guard in the castle that they were hiding in, and he wanted all the gold he could carry. Now, after the deed was done, he got his gold, but in the form of molten gold poured into his mouth, for the reason that Edward felt that why would one king want a subject that betrays his own king? The punishment for the Bruce women and Isabella Macduff was that they were hung in cages and exposed to the elements for what would be until their release upwards of 4 years till the eventual success of Robert the Bruce. And it is at this point in the history that Robert the Bruce is said to have encountered the famous story of him and the spider. Now, this famous story was attributed to the Bruce only much later in history, and seems to have very little evidence that it actually happened. But so it goes that what happened was, Robert walks into a cave, being all dejected at his current situation, and sees a spider web. Now, being frustrated, he smashes the spider web and then sits down. But what he notices was the spider trying to reform the web. Now, being in a bad mood, he smashes it again, and the spider tried to reform the web again. And this happened several times. And what epiphany the Bruce finally got was that if a spider can keep trying, even against these constant failings, why couldn't he, the King of Scotland, do the same? It is from here that the Bruce's fortune starts to change, and he does this by guerrilla warfare. Hit and run tactics that favored his force, as the English, with their castles and supply lines, were predictable, while his was not. And of course, the fact that he didn't have much men in the first place to fight a conventional war. Now, this kind of secrecy can be felt in the game of Hammer the Scots, because you actually do not see the face of the units of your enemy, and you only see them when you fight with them, meaning that a force that you think could be a very powerful one could actually be just a weak militia. Now, Robert also kept to this strategy of mobility by destroying castles that he took, as he knew that even if he held a castle, firstly, he did not have the forces to garrison them, and also that more than likely any English force that came in strength would take away his castles and use it against him. This was all going well until at one point Robert was pushed into a pitched battle. This is the Battle of Laden Hill. Now, it is a small battle and of little significance to the overall physical campaign to take back Scotland, but its impact on morale was great. By using the narrow terrain, the Bruce managed to defeat the English force sent against him. And the important propaganda piece for that is that it was a pitched battle. Like Wallace and the Battle of Stirling Bridge, it showed that the English could be defeated by so-called honorable means. Man-to-man fighting rather than guerrilla warfare, and so on and so forth. And from that, everybody loves a winner. The populace started to turn to Robert the Bruce. It is with this growing success that in 1307, Edward Longshanks finally decides he needs to head north again. The difference in this point is that he is already in his 60s, and he was so sick that he had to be carried in a litter. He basically made it to within sight of the Scottish border before the Hammer of the Scots himself was no more. Now, his death caused the entire army to turn back, and according to his wishes, he is said to have wanted his body to be boiled, his bones carried in front of an army that defeated Scotland. He also said that he was not to be buried in Westminster till the Scots were subdued. Although I did get conflicting sources that he was buried in Westminster, I'll leave that up to you to decide. And this of course results in our death of a king. Now, with Longshanks dead, Edward II became King of England, but inherits a kingdom tired of the endless wars that his father carried on, and several parts of his new kingdom that wanted to break away from him, being the parts from France, Wales, and of course Scotland. Now, the sad part is the thing he did not inherit from his father was the clout, respect / fear that Edward I exuded. On top of that, Edward II's prestige was heavily hit with the rumors of his homosexuality with his favorite courtier Gaveston, which the nobles hated so much they killed him before reporting it to the king. Also, the Bruce becoming more successful in taking back lands in Scotland also did not help Edward II's cause, as a lot of the nobles were saying that Edward II was throwing away a lot of the gains that Edward I had made. The strange part about this is, like any part of history, a lot of these nobles wanted the situation to improve, but did not want to contribute the resources to keep Scotland English. Time was on the side of the Bruce. That was until the Siege of Stirling. For Robert had sent his own brother Edward Bruce to take Stirling, as he trusted no one more. But Edward Bruce saw himself more of a traditional knight, and when he had almost starved out Stirling, out of chivalry, he made a deal with the constable that if the English could relieve the castle in about a year, the Bruce's forces will leave it. But if the castle was not relieved, then the Bruces will be allowed to enter the castle without further bloodshed. In doing so, he had forced the one thing that Robert the Bruce did not want, which was a pitched battle against the English. And because this became public knowledge, Robert himself was now binded by chivalry to honor his brother's oath / agreement. It is from here that a fall of a king will occur at the Bannock Burn. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Until next time, till next word.